Back in the early 2000s, I was around 13 years old, living in a small coastal town in Maine. It was a close-knit community where everyone knew each other. I had a deep love for exploring the rugged coastline and the dense pine forests that surrounded our town. One summer, I decided to spend a weekend camping alone in the woods. My parents were supportive, knowing how much I enjoyed nature, and they trusted me to be safe. I packed my gear and set off early in the morning, eager for an adventure. The first day was perfect. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the scent of pine and salt water. I hiked along the coastal trails, stopping occasionally to admire the breathtaking views of the Atlantic Ocean. By the afternoon, I found a secluded spot to set up camp near a small, crystal-clear stream. As dusk approached, I gathered some firewood and built a small campfire. I cooked a simple meal and enjoyed the tranquility of the forest. The only sounds were the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant call of seabirds. I felt completely at peace. As night fell, I decided to go for a swim in the stream to cool off. The water was refreshing, and I floated on my back, gazing up at the starry sky. It was one of those moments where everything felt perfect. Little did I know, my peaceful evening was about to take a terrifying turn. While I was swimming, I heard a loud, eerie cry that echoed through the forest. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before. My heart raced, and I quickly got out of the water, shivering from both the cold and fear. I hastily put on my clothes and stood still, trying to locate the source of the noise. Suddenly, I saw a movement on the other side of the stream. 3 shadowy figures emerged from the trees, and I could tell they were not friendly. They appeared to be searching for something or someone. My instincts told me to hide, so I quietly slipped behind a large boulder near the stream. From my hiding spot, I watched as the figures moved closer. They were carrying flashlights and weapons, and their voices were filled with anger. It was clear they were looking for someone, and I feared it might be me. I held my breath, hoping they wouldn't find my campsite or any signs of my presence. Just when I thought they would pass by, one of them spotted my footprints near the water's edge. They began to search the area more thoroughly, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they found me. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. In a desperate bid to escape, I quietly moved away from the boulder and crept deeper into the forest. I made my way through the dense underbrush, careful not to make any noise. The darkness was disorienting, and my heart pounded in my chest as I navigated the unfamiliar terrain. Eventually, I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. It looked like it hadn't been used in years, but it provided the perfect hiding spot. I slipped inside and found a small corner to crouch down in, my body trembling with fear. I could hear the men searching the woods nearby, their voices growing louder and more frustrated. I knew I had to remain absolutely silent if I wanted to stay hidden. Hours seemed to pass as I huddled in the darkness, praying they would give up and leave. Finally, the voices began to fade, and the forest grew quiet once more. I waited a while longer, just to be sure they were gone, before cautiously emerging from the cabin. My legs were stiff and sore, but I couldn't afford to rest. I needed to put as much distance between myself and those men as possible. I made my way back to my campsite, hoping to gather my belongings and head home. To my dismay, the men had ransacked the area, taking most of my gear and leaving a mess behind. I quickly salvaged what I could and started the long trek back to town. The journey was grueling, and my mind was in a state of constant alert. Every rustle of leaves and snap of twigs sent my heart racing. I kept looking over my shoulder, fearing the men might return. When I finally reached home, it was early morning. I was exhausted, dirty, and shaken. My parents were horrified when I told them what had happened. They wanted to call the police, but I begged them not to. I was afraid that those men might come after us if they found out I had reported them. We decided to keep it a secret, hoping it was an isolated incident. Life slowly returned to normal, but the experience left a lasting impact on me. I became more cautious and aware of my surroundings, and my love for solo adventures diminished. It was late in the afternoon when I left the bustling city of Seattle. I'd been eyeing Mount Rainier for years, but had never mustered the inspiration to climb it until that day. I'd explored the surrounding forest several times, so I knew the terrain pretty well. I'd hiked along the foothills, but never attempted the steep climb or aimed for the summit. Mount Rainier, a majestic and towering stratovolcano, rose dramatically against the skyline. Its snow-capped peak was visible from miles away, resembling a guardian watching over the city. The mountain's rugged slopes were dotted with lush meadows and alpine wildflowers, painting a picturesque scene that seemed almost surreal. As I trekked through the thick forest, the vibrant colors of the wildflowers caught my eye. A thin strip of dark clouds began to gather on the horizon, hinting at an approaching storm. It was early summer, and late afternoon thunderstorms were not uncommon. Seattle, sitting at about 500 feet elevation, often experienced sudden weather changes, especially during the summer months. At 25, I was a seasoned hiker and well prepared for any challenge. Having just hitchhiked from Portland, Oregon, I felt ready for anything. By the time I reached the tree line and began to trace the edge of a steep slope, the wind had picked up to 20 knots with gusts of up to 35, roughly 40 miles per hour. I stayed on the sheltered side as I made my way up, hunkering down in the trees whenever the wind howled too fiercely. Down below, the city lights of Seattle began to flicker on as the sky darkened. Just before I dropped over the edge and into what was rapidly becoming a violent thunderstorm, I turned to look one last time at the city. The thick black clouds of the approaching storm were now engulfing it, and soon the lights went out. Darkness enveloped me. The wind gusted to 50 miles per hour, pelting me with hard, cold rain and hail the size of marbles. I huddled down, covering my face and head with my backpack and rain jacket. I must have fallen asleep or passed out because when I woke up, I found myself cross-legged in a small cave with a rock overhang. It shielded the entrance and me from the worst of the storm. The searing sound of lightning close by and the strong smell of ozone jolted me awake. The thunder was deafening, echoing off the cliffs around me, but it was the sound of the lightning itself, a crack and sizzle, that intrigued me the most. At times, I saw bolts of lightning as wide as houses, slicing through the sky above me. The continuous, echoing thunder sounded like a massive explosion reverberating off the cliff walls. When I looked down at my hands and legs in the intermittent flashes of lightning, I noticed a faint blue glow. Everything around me, including my backpack and rain jacket, hummed and crackled with a faint blue light. As my eyes adjusted, I saw that I had somehow crawled along a sheer rock ledge to my current position. I had no idea where I was. Through the constant flashes, I could barely make out a canyon wall directly across from me, about 150 or 200 feet away. Below me was a sheer drop of hundreds of feet. Above me, complete darkness. It felt like I was trapped in a storm inside a bottle. Inevitably, I settled down and just sat there, feeling reverent and humbled by the sheer power of the storm. The lightning and thunder seemed almost sentient, shaking my tiny cliffside perch. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I tried to uncross my legs and stand up, they were completely numb. It took me several minutes to regain feeling and balance. When I did, I noticed that everything had changed again. The storm had passed, and the sky was now completely clear. It was nighttime. Looking out from my vantage point, I saw the city lights of Seattle spread out below me, their familiarity both comforting and dazzling. It was like waking up from a particularly vivid dream. The night sky above was one of the brightest I had ever seen. The new moon allowed countless stars to shine brilliantly, creating a high-definition map of the Milky Way galaxy. As I gazed upwards, I noticed a single point of light moving from the direction the storm had come. When it reached a spot directly overhead, it stopped and hovered. I craned my neck several times to believe what I was seeing. At first, I thought it was a satellite, but shortly after it stopped, it began to fade and shimmer as if ascending straight up. Just before it disappeared completely, it flared brighter than any of the surrounding stars and then shot across the sky at an impossible speed, leaving a flash trail like a shooting star. Realizing I was too exhausted to continue, I decided to camp there on the edge, still awestruck by the experience. I slept between two worlds, the memory of the storm and the strange light imprinted on my mind. I never did find that place again. When I described my experience to others, no one knew of a canyon or a cave with an overhang fitting my description. I just smile, knowing it was a moment that belonged solely to me.